Yeah, she's on a mission, keeping our culture lifted. Now you can watch and listen to Tammi Mac. Tammi Mac. Oh, what show is that? It's the Tammi Mac Show on Fox Soul.
Tammi Mac, hey, Tammi Mac, yeah, who that? Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac, hey, so you know this Tammi Mac, hey, Tammi Mac.
Welcome to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Hello, everybody. I am Tammi. You think of famous jazz musicians, names like Miles Davis, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington come to mind. But one of the biggest driving forces behind jazz and some of the most influential individuals in jazz of the 20th century were women. Women like Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, and Nina Simone. Tonight, though, the business of being Black is Black women in jazz. Please welcome, and I have the utmost honor of having on my show tonight, Grammy and Tony Award-winning jazz giant, Dee Dee Bridgewater. Hi, Dee Dee.
Hey, Tammy. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you. 3-time Grammy Award-winning drummer, give the drummer some, composer, producer, and educator, Terry Lynn Carrington is here. Hi, Terry Lynn.
Hey, thanks for having us.
The founder and managing director of Passion Music Group, Michelle Taylor. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Tammy. Thanks so much for inviting me.
And the president of Gail Boyd PC and Gail Boyd Artist Management. Who else but Gail Boyd? Hi, Gail.
Hi, Tammy. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing just fine. Our traditional question here at the Tammi Mac Late Show is why? Why should Black people care about jazz and women and Black women in jazz? Terry Lynn.
Well, I think that there's a lot of reasons. And one is just our cultural history. Jazz is rooted in Black music from field hollers, work songs, all of that. And I think it's been influential in all of the popular music of today. And I think when people don't recognize that, they're really missing a big part of their culture. And as far as women go, I mean, we've been there all along. Even in the people that you mentioned when you opened the show, they were all vocalists, but there's also been instrumentalists. And a lot of the instrumentalist names we don't know. We know a few, Mary Lou Williams, of course, from back in the day, Lil Hart Armstrong, but there's been more that we don't know. So I think that, you know, we should care about Black women in jazz because we should care about the future. And Black women are really leading right now. Black feminist thought is leading. So I think that if we care about the potential of the music, then we're going to care about Black women and Black little girls that may see young boys playing music and wanting to participate and not wanting to feel like they're excluded or not welcomed. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing, hoping that people will care more about gender balance in the music.
Oh, yeah, very essential. Gail, why should Black people care about Black women in jazz?
So there are three things in that question: jazz, Black, and women. And I'd like to even talk about a little bit about why should we care about jazz? And as Terry Lynn said, it is actually African music brought to the United States, and all the way from the field hollers, the ring shouts, gospel, then blues, then jazz. It's a continuum. So if we like any of the music, Quincy Jones talks about from bebop to hip hop. If you like any kind of music, you need to have, at least I think, a rudimentary understanding of jazz. Why would we care about Black people in jazz? Because it's our music. Jazz is Black American music. And why would we care about women in jazz? Because we're so underrepresented sometimes that I think it's important for people to know that we exist. Melba Liston is another amazing arranger that so many people don't know who she is. But there were so many jazz musicians who counted on her to write their arrangements. If they don't care about women in jazz, they wouldn't know about her. They wouldn't know about Hazel Scott, who was a fabulous pianist. They wouldn't know about Terry Lynn Carrington, who's here tonight. And they wouldn't know about Dee Dee Bridgewater, who's one of our legends. So that's why I think people should care about Black women in jazz.
Michelle, why? Why care? Why should we care?
Well, just going on what both Terry Lynn and Gail said, I mean, Black women in jazz, jazz is born of the Black experience. So if you, it, it's coming from who we are as a people. And Black women in jazz, again, there are so many that people just don't know. And for me, it's so important that little Black girls who have the desire to play music see themselves in the women that are representing the music today. You know, so many people put down instruments or put down something that they enjoy because they don't see someone who they can aspire to be like. And it's so important that we lift up our Black women and our Black little girls to say, this, you can do this as well. You are just as good, just as accomplished, just as talented as any little Black boy that's playing jazz. It's very important.
Dee Dee Bridgewater, why should Black people care about Black women in jazz?
I think that Black people should care about Black women in jazz because of the very basic fact that we are women. We are mothers, we are sisters, we are daughters. And Black women in the jazz music industry have held up this music and lifted the men behind the music for so many years that it's time that we pay it forward, as we say, and acknowledge the presence of all of these women on whose shoulders I stand, vocalists on whose shoulders I stand, but also musicians. And I think that we now in the 21st century, because of conflicts of all kinds of situations, we have arrived at this moment, Tammy, where we can have this conversation. So I think that it's important for our people to understand that this is our music. This is a music that began with African-American people, that was born, as Terry Lynn and Gail had also already mentioned, out of slavery. And it was a way for us to express ourselves. And I think that the reason why we don't acknowledge the women in this music as Black people is based in part on the stereotypes that we have about jazz music, about blues music, about these being negative musics, you know, having some kind of negative connotation to them. So I think that these are the things that we have to break down. And I think that it is extremely important that we acknowledge all of the Black women who have been a part of the foundation of this music.
You touched on a couple of things,
living.
Dee Dee, that I want to bring up before we get into the thick of things. But this might be the thick of things when you talk about acknowledging women in jazz and just acknowledging jazz. Period. Do you believe that this genre of music gets the acknowledgement that it deserves from today's generation? And anyone can take that question.
No.
I can tell you.
I would agree.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think it's a funny question, though, as far as deserves.
Yes.
I mean, we want to say, yes, what we love, deserves more recognition, of course. But I have these discussions a lot with friends that are in the hip hop community, and they feel kind of disassociated with jazz. And I always talk to them about how jazz is modern. They think about it more as something old, something from another day, something that belongs in a museum. And I try to talk to them about there are modern jazz artists. There are young people that are mixing hip hop and jazz, mixing rock and jazz, always has been. And the music, as Gail said, is a continuum. So it's not something that's just old, though there are people that play styles, say from the 40s or 50s, and they haven't really moved past that. And they choose to do that. And that's wonderful. But the majority of young musicians I know are really trying to move it forward. So those kinds of bridges are really important and I think helpful to get people that haven't been exposed to the music, to make them understand that it is connected to what they do like to listen to. And one of the arguments that a lot of these people say is that hip hop has taken technology and has been innovative with technology. And that's true. But I think when we look at all Black music and all Black art forms, there's innovation. There are different kinds of innovation. So, and a lot of the young jazz artists are using that same technology. So, yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Jazz itself was an innovation. Blues was an innovation. Even the gospel that people like artists like Mahalia Jackson sang was an inspiration, innovation rather. Kirk Franklin's form of gospel and innovation. So I agree. I believe that Black music, no matter what genre, is always innovative and ever growing. Michelle, I saw you say, no, jazz doesn't get the acknowledgement. So I'm coming to you when we return to find out why you think it doesn't get the acknowledgement. And we'll go straight to our chat room because our soulmates are chatting right now, and they're chatting so much. I want to be a part of the conversation. Here I come, y'all. Here I come. We'll chat with you right back after these messages. That's kind of old school, huh? I need to come up with something more innovative to make these transitions. We'll be right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Tonight, the business of being Black are women jazz artists. Oh, how I love tonight's show. And apparently you guys are loving tonight's show too. Let me get in this chat room and get all up in y'all business and see what y'all chatting about over here. Ladies, I'm going to take a little journey through the chat room here. Let's bear with me. Therese says, hey, Tammi Mac, great topic tonight. Fulvia Orlando.
Fulvia
Orlando. Yes. Beautiful topic. Incog says, wow, Dee Dee Bridgewater. It's been a hot minute since I've seen her live, a living legend. Jazz is Black music, but I find it's been sustained by a largely white and affluent audience. Oh, that's such a great point. We will definitely.
That is.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. We're going to get to that. John Clayton says, this is wonderful. Preach, Dee Dee. T. Johnson says, I like the opening question of every show. Why, thank you, T. Jazz is a music genre that originated in the African-American communities of New Orleans in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with roots in blues and ragtime. Women in jazz are hardly mentioned, which, Therese, is why we are having this show. Thank you for taking us down that historical lane of education when it comes to jazz, as if these artists didn't know that already. I appreciate you educating us. Bruce Taylor in the chat room. We're in the presence of musical greatness, he says. And then this is a great point also. Therese says, when we were talking about how innovative jazz music is, and Therese says, jazz was seen as socially unacceptable, often called the devil's music. Do you all remember a time when jazz was called the devil's music?
Well, we remember when it was called the devil's music. We weren't there then.
Right.
But yeah.
But yes, it was. It was referred to as the devil's music. Well,
anything out of that wasn't
confuses me. It confuses me why jazz would have been considered anything other than instrumentation, the instrumentation of music. It's not like there were underlying lyrics that had this horrible context or to it. So what was it about jazz music that made it unacceptable?
It's Black American music, and it was ruled unacceptable by a whole swath of American society. They say that Henry Ford encouraged the whole idea of square dancing across the country to keep people from getting involved in jazz, because he considered that to be music that would send you down a path of destruction. So there's a lot of reasons why jazz was not considered like appropriate music, but it really has everything to do with it emanating from Black people and racism in America.
Wow.
And you'll recall that there was a time when jazz was the popular music. People used to put on their finest clothes and go uptown to Harlem and party all night long to jazz. So it was once considered the popular music of the day.
Well, Gail, I can tell you, when I was in elementary school, they made me learn how to square dance.
It was required in a lot of schools across the country.
Yeah, I'm from Texas, so we were square dancing in boots in Texas, and singing and whistling Dixie all day long.
If I can interject, jazz was considered to be the devil's music. Blues music was considered to be the devil's music. I think that it was about trying to keep a handle on Black people as a society, and by instilling these negative thoughts into our psyches, then it caused the division that was necessary to keep the music down and to be able to promote the music that they wanted to. This was a music that one had to have feeling for. One had to understand the language and where it was coming from. And it came out of this need that we had as a people to have our own music, our own thing that no one of any other color could access unless they came through us. So, I think that we have to always remember in the context of historical fact that anytime we have invented anything, it has become immediately something negative.
Or they took it
but
away.
but not negative enough for other people not to copy it.
Right.
There you go.
Right.
Absolutely, Terry Lynn.
So,
Right.
I mean, it's the devil's music until somebody else plays it.
Well,
That's
like
right.
And then it becomes
Until the
acceptable.
devil plays it.
Yes. Like Benny Goodman being called the king of swing. Really?
Right.
In the day of Duke Ellington. What is that?
So Michelle, I want to get back to you because you said you don't believe that today's generation acknowledges jazz for what it is and what it has contributed to music.
Well, you know what? I think that's starting to happen a bit more. Terry Lynn mentioned, talking with the students about jazz and the correlation with jazz and hip hop. I think that the younger people are really starting to play music and experience music in a different way because they're so open to various genres. And the new jazz, if you will, incorporates hip hop, incorporates rock, incorporates a lot of different music. So I think the younger generation, they are more open to it. But, there was a time when, and even still, when you hear about or you go to a jazz festival, there's no jazz on the festival.
I was about to say, I know exactly what you are about to say.
And so
jazz festival and Eric Benet is performing. Johnny Gill is performing.
So I think
artists.
We're there. We are there. The jazz artists are there, but we're relegated to the smaller stages. We don't get the headline.
Right.
That's horrible.
Right.
It's a jazz festival and the jazz artists are not even headline. They're relegated.
Right.
The jazz artists are on the smaller stage. That's a sad story to tell.
Well, you know what, Tammy, the story behind calling these festivals jazz festivals is because for insurance purposes, promoters don't have to pay as much for their insurance for a festival if it is a jazz festival as opposed to a rock or a pop or a hip hop or a rap festival.
Jazz is safer.
Yes.
And that in itself is disrespectful.
Yeah.
But it's also tastemaker music. I mean, when you think about commercials, if they're trying to sell something that is
Oh, yeah.
classy, they're going to use jazz. They're not going to use
Yes.
any of the other genres. So it's very
Yes.
much tastemaker music. And I think back when I see older movies at Small's Paradise and Club de Lisa in Chicago and places like that, you had Black people on stage, but you had an all-white audience. So when you were asking the question earlier, or someone I think in the chat mentioned, why is it that you don't see a lot of Blacks in the, that's historical also. And I think at this point now, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been to a jazz club to see one of my clients and been the only Black person in the audience. I don't know if that's happened to you, Michelle, but it happens a lot. And I think we have to figure out a way to let people know. And I think some of the younger jazz musicians need to say they are still jazz musicians. I find so many of the younger ones who are jazz musicians, but they say, well, I incorporate jazz into what I'm doing. But I like to think that we can expand the definition of jazz if they just wouldn't run away from the title. I remember at one of the Grammys when I was lamenting that there was no jazz on the main stage. And then I thought about it and I said, no, you know what? Kendrick Lamar was on stage and there was so much jazz underneath what he was doing that I think people just don't know that. Terrace Martin is a saxophonist who went to Vail Jazz Camp. Kamasi Washington, these are jazz musicians who play with him, but they want to, sometimes, I'm not blaming anybody in particular, but sometimes they try to run away from the title jazz, thinking that it will give them a wider berth, more money or whatever. And that's one of the things I would like to see us try to change.
Yeah, you spoke to our soulmate that said jazz is Black music, but I find it's been sustained by a largely white and affluent audience. So Terry Lynn, how do you feel about that? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I feel that especially with a lot of jazz education now and a lot of the young people that are playing in these schools, they get these opportunities because of their affluent neighborhoods, and they're able to go to summer programs. They're able to do a lot of things that sometimes our under-resourced communities, they don't have the same access. So I think that's a huge problem, especially with jazz education, because I think what happened was these schools figured out a way to, they commodified it and figured out that jazz can make money in education. And then we, as Black people, were more and more left out of being able to go to these schools and learning more from the traditional way, which is from mentors and from the School of Hard Knocks. And there's something really about that, passing the tradition on that way. But now to be competitive, I think you really do have to, understand a certain amount of theory and technique and all the things that make you competitive with the students today. So that's one part of the problem, but also just as far as support, because when you're going to theaters and concert halls, where the ticket prices are higher than clubs, I think that it immediately changes the audience. So I'm very much into playing free concerts in parks and those kinds of things as much as I am. Everybody likes playing in nice halls, but I really like to diversify the places because that's the only way you're going to make sure that everybody gets to see it.
Wow.
Yeah, accessibility is very important. Making the music accessible.
I agree. Yeah, it has to be accessible. I'm going to go to the chat real quick. M. Williams says, once upon a time, jazz was as big as hip hop is today. Our soulmate says, today's generation ignores jazz unless a contemporary artist from hip hop or R&B partners with an artist from the jazz genre. To grab the youth, you have to bridge what's hip to them for appeal. And then Tammy Black, our soulmate. Are you playing? You're just trying to rhyme with Tammy Black. Tammy Black says, my great grandmother listened to Mary Lou Williams. She talks about a lot of jazz and women in jazz. She plays it to this day. And then jazz has been propagandized and weaponized against us since its inception. That is what you were talking about, Dee Dee, how it's kind of been used against us. Jazz is a great music genre very therapeutic. I would have to agree.
Can be.
Yeah, very therapeutic. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm going to get all into these women's lives individually so we can find out exactly how jazz entered their world on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Hi, everybody. So tonight, the business of being Black are jazz artists who happen to be women and who happen to be very prominent in the industry tonight. Please welcome jazz and please welcome Grammy and Tony Award-winning jazz giant Dee Dee Bridgewater, three-time Grammy Award-winning drummer, composer, producer, and educator Terry Lynn Carrington, the founder and managing director of Passion Music Group, Michelle Taylor, and the president of Gail Boyd PC and Gail Boyd Artist Management, Gail Boyd. So let's get into this. I want to know, Terry, you are the first female artist ever to win a Grammy Award for Best Jazz Instrumental Album. The first ever.
Yeah, well, you know, it's
Your
funny
thoughts,
because
I mean, just your thoughts about being the first, and should there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 before you?
absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. It's kind of bittersweet because as much as you want to celebrate that, it is an accomplishment, but at the same time, it really points out that something's wrong with this picture. It points out the inequities that we've been dealing with for a long time. And it somehow makes me feel, I mean, I'm happy, but it kind of makes me very sad at the same time because I have friends, colleagues, and heroes and mentors, you know, that did not get that kind of recognition. So I think, you know, that's why I've dedicated myself to, and probably the rest of my life, to working more for gender equity, because that's kind of ridiculous. Because I think it was almost 60 years or something like that of the Grammy Awards, and not only the first to win, but I was the first instrumentalist ever nominated.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, yeah.
That is
So
crazy.
those are the things we're trying to change, you know, because, and you notice, like, when we talk about the past, we keep talking about the same names, you know, and that's okay. They're great, but that still points to the problem, because it points to these women, Mary Lou Williams, Melba Liston, and speaking of instrumentalists, but it points to them and even myself as exceptions. And that's the problem. We can't, you know, if there's an exception, that means there's a rule that's not cool in the first place.
I love that. If there's an exception, that means there's a rule. So what would the rule be?
Well, it's been the narrative that this is men's music, as far as the men play the music and women sing it. And that's kind of been the unwritten narrative. So whenever you saw or heard a woman playing and she was great, you looked at her, well, that's, you know, her, and, you know, like she's an exception because there were so few. I think even today, right now, it's every time I try to do any kind of study of my own on this, which is, you know, not official, of course, and some that I've read, it's around 5%, you know, still somewhere in that area. Like if we looked at NEA Jazz Masters, it's about 5% women, and instrumentalists even less. If we look at covers of Downbeat over the last 10 years, 5% women. And there's some other figures that say the same thing. So this is, you know, something that we're trying to really look at. And then if you look at Black women, then that's even less.
Right.
We do a lot of talking on the Tammi Mac Late Show about Black people wanting to be accepted by mainstream and wanting and for Black people to be great or to consider themselves successful, having to have the acknowledgement and the accolades from mainstream, which ultimately is white organizations like the Grammys. So what does having the Grammy mean to you or for you? Like, do you feel more successful? Would you feel the same success without it? What does that mean to you?
Well, honestly, the first thing it means is my fees raised, like it affects your pocketbook.
Okay.
Definitely. I saw that. I don't know, everybody feels that way, but that's
I didn't
definitely
see
something.
that.
You didn't?
No.
Well, you already
No, I
making
didn't.
money. You were making more than me. So.
Yeah, but look, but hold on now, Terry Lee. She still wanted more than what she had.
Well, when you talk about making money, I mean, and how the Grammys affect us, I think it brings with it a kind of respect that we become able to have as Black women, and I think that for society and for all of the mores that we have about the societal system, we are elevated. We become elevated on the ladder of that system because we've got a Grammy, because of the way our country is set up and how we are so infatuated with singling out and awarding people. But I don't know, Terry Lynn, I did not, but I won my first Grammy in 1997. Well, 98 for an album I did in 97. I didn't get more monies, but I did become headliner. It made me headliner material.
But with headliner material, Dee Dee, doesn't that command more money?
Well, I'm still in the struggle for more money. I'm in the struggle for more money with the male counterparts that play in the same performance venues that I play in, and I fill them up like they do, but they get 3 times more money than I do. So I'm on that fight. I am on that fight. That's my fight right now.
Right.
Because this inequality, this disparaging inequality that we experience as women has got to stop.
Michelle, you made history as the first woman in the music industry to head the jazz division of a major record label.
Yes.
That's kind of laughable because I'm like, what? Like,
yeah. And it was very interesting because I had been got my first job in the music industry in the late 80s. And that was in 93. And I got to the company and it was, of course, jazz was considered at that point a special project. So that was the first thing we were going to change, because I was running a very reputable, I was at Atlantic Records, which was founded on jazz and Black music. And to have jazz relegated to the title of special project, that was the first thing we were going to change. But it was a constant battle, trying to get the respect that the music deserved, trying to get the respect that I deserved, trying to get people to sign in for buy-in on various projects that I wanted to get done. And of course, when there were major layoffs at the company, guess who got laid off? Guess who was one of the first persons to get laid? I mean, it was, I had a 3-year run, but, and, I have to say, just going back to the respect throughout the industry that jazz does not get. It's very interesting because, and we're coming up tomorrow on the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd being murdered. Yes. When that happened, so many companies, music industry included, were, jumping on the diversity, the racial equity bandwagon. And, a lot of coalitions were formed, Black music coalitions. Never a seat at the table for jazz representation. And if there were, it was, and we love Quincy Jones to death. We love Herbie Hancock to death. But why do we have to beg for a seat at the table of a Black music coalition? Why do we have to ask? Why is there no woman? Why is there no female representation in this coalition? we still have a long way to go as far as the respect that this music deserves. And being the first and being one of the only, I mean, I totally understand the frustration, with Terry being the only or the first getting the Grammy. Why was I the first to hit a jazz division at a major label?
Yeah.
There were so many women that could have done it.
And you're right, Atlantic is huge, and they've been in the music industry for quite some time to where this should.
But it was founded on jazz and Black music. And to have that music relegated to a special project, that just didn't seem, and we had a great run while I was there. Myself and my team, we had a great run with the artists, and the artists used to say to me that they would love coming up to the division because they saw themselves coming up to the jazz division at that point. They looked around and they saw people that looked like them. And that made us very proud.
Yes. So let's see if we can find some people who look like us in this commercial break. We'll be right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Tonight, Black women in jazz. How about that? Let's go to this chat room. T. Johnson says, it's a shame we don't get recognized more for our talents. Yes, shame on you, America. Incog says, people don't realize that these awards allow you to demand a larger quote at times, especially when it comes to acting. Let's see. A headliner doesn't always mean more money, Tammy. It was reported Beyonce got less money for Coachella, while newbies like Ariana Grande allegedly were paid more, but she's white. Yep. So we know how that goes. Okay.
Yes, we do.
Then Centuria Cotton says, I worked at Atlantic Records for 4 years. Michelle, are you familiar with Centuria Cotton? She says, men call all the shots. And then Gail Boyd sounds so much like Maya Angelou.
Everybody says that. I don't hear it, but everybody says that.
Now I hear it. I hear it now. Oh my goodness, I hear it now. Let's see. Former Recording Academy CEO Deborah Dugan has been trying to expose all the shenanigans going on at the Academy or industry, but they ousted her.
And they sure did.
Our soulmate says, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Thank the Day is awesome song. I'm going to start meditating to this one. So beautiful, so peaceful. So since you brought up Dee Dee, let's start talking about Dee Dee from Afro Blue to Memphis. Yes, I'm ready. My husband, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. So we go often, Dee Dee, often.
Okay.
So what was the inspiration behind your Grammy Award winning project, Dear Ella?
Oh, that came about after Ella passed. I was on tour with a pianist named Jackie Terrason and his trio, and we were asked to come up with a project. And I said, well, let's honor Ella because she had just passed. And at the end of that tour, because people would just go crazy when I would walk out on stage and I would say, because we didn't announce that the tour was going to be an Ella tribute, but I would announce that it was a tribute to Ella and people would just go crazy. So by the end of the tour, I had thought that a lot of people were going to jump on the, tribute bandwagon to honor Ella. And the only person that did was Mel Torme. And then he became very sick while he was doing his project and he couldn't finish it. I was privy to that information and I thought, well, someone's got to do it. And I had that brilliant idea to do it. I proposed it to the label that was distributing my records at the time. And they said, you got to do it. And I said, oh, no, that's not good. But that was the catalyst for it. And then afterwards, I made a very conscious decision that I wanted to have musicians on that album who had worked with Ella Fitzgerald. You had to have worked with Ella in some capacity, even as far as the sound engineers go. When I was looking and speaking with sound engineers for the recording, there was an engineer who was highly recommended to me by several people. And when I spoke to him, he said something, I cannot remember what it was, but it was very condescending about Ella Fitzgerald. And so I said to him, you know what, it was nice speaking to you. Obviously, we're not on the same wavelength. And thank you for entertaining this project. And then I left. So, Ella, I stand on Ella's shoulders. And I just felt that it was really important that someone honor her. And that's how that happened. And that it was received because I decided that, I cannot sing like Ella Fitzgerald, Tammy. I'm from the bebop era. She was from the swing era. And I couldn't fix my lips to phrase. I could not get her phrasing because I had come up after her in another period. But I just really felt that it was important to honor her. And I have to say that I have been walked to the Grammy podium by two women on whose shoulders I stand. So Ella and Billie Holiday.
I want to ask you, Dee, now, usually if you're in pop or if you're R&B artist even or hip hop artist, your celebrity status based on, people running up to you, getting all of these types of endorsements for products. And you kind of realize when you reach your fame, when you're in other genres. But even when Herbie Hancock became famous, they wouldn't even allow him to be seen in his music video on MTV. So how is it that you, I referenced you as iconic. Several of our soulmates are saying, I can't believe you're talking to a legend tonight, Dee Dee Bridgewater. How do you gauge your celebrity, your status, your iconic, legendary status? How do you gauge that as a jazz artist?
I don't gauge that. I don't gauge it at all. I'm not interested. Why should I be interested in my celebrity status? I am too busy just trying to live day to day. We've just gone through a pandemic. I was very fortunate because I had set monies aside, so I was okay throughout the last year and a half. And that's because I was raised and I was educated and I had people that told me the things that I need to do. But celebrity status in the jazz world, honey, it's just, what is that? When I go to Europe, when I go to France, I lived 24 years in France. I am a celebrity in France. I go out my door in France. I can go into the corner grocery store or the pharmacy, and people go, oh, la, 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 and or I'm walking down the street and somebody will point, or if I'm in a restaurant when I'm in France, somebody will say, oh my, they'll come up to me. Here in the United States, I can pass as incognito. Oh, baby, and I love it. I love it. But
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dee Dee.
No, I was just gonna say, in the jazz world, we don't live that way. That's not our interest and our focus is
the music
elsewhere. We're on the music.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what is my next thing gonna be. Where am I gonna go next? And that's what's important to me. It's not the celebrity status. I know what I've done. I'm at that age now, at almost 71. I know my worth. I know my self-worth. I know, how people value me. And if they don't, I value myself. Yeah. And that is what is important. And that is what I try to pass on to young women.
Gail, as a lawyer, you've represented jazz artists such as Regina Carter, Tommy Flanagan, Barron. I mean, just to name a few. But what challenges have you faced representing women that you have not faced when representing men? I'm sure there is a disparity.
Ooh.
As a lawyer, I can't say that I've had challenges that are greater representing women, because I represent mainly people in jazz, and there are the challenges. I mean, there's so many things that when you're trying to negotiate a contract with a recording company, for example, male or female, if it's jazz, there are certain things that they are going to say to you is a take it or leave it proposition. And then you have to decide. It's an adult decision, I call it. You can take it, but you have to recognize that if you take it, that you are making the decision that that's how your career is going to go, or you can leave it and you're making a decision that you're going to go out on your own. Right now, I personally recommend that every single person own their own masters, as Dee Dee has done for I don't know how many years. And I think that's the smartest way to do it, because once you own your own master, then you can decide when you release it. You can decide how much you're going to charge for it. And you can make the kinds of decisions that when Michelle was at the label, and I had clients at that point on Michelle's label, and there were things that I would want and Michelle would want to give them to me. But we weren't able to do it because of the structure that was around her. So I say that you should own your own master and then become the captain of your own ship. So I can't say the differences have been male and female. I can say that most of the time I represent jazz artists, and they are really at the bottom of the barrel when you're trying to negotiate with record companies, and often with other companies as well, festivals. It's I have not seen that difference. It's been pretty bad, evenly divided.
We're going to take a quick break and come right back. I cannot believe the show is over. We'll be right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul, where tonight we talk with Black women in the jazz business, just in the business of jazz, all that jazz. Terry Lynn, you earned the highest honor bestowed on jazz artists, the National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Master Award. You want to talk about receiving that award?
I think I was pretty shocked because I am a little bit young, but there were two people that were younger than me, Ornette Coleman and Sonny Rollins. They received theirs at 54 and 53. I'm 55. But yeah, that was a beautiful honor. This year it's been a really great year for me, actually, even though we're in a pandemic. I had an album that came out right before the pandemic hit, and it did well, and it was really dealing with a lot of the issues that we ended up being faced with, like, police violence and the prison system, gender equity, gay rights, lots of different subjects on this album. And a lot of people say, how did you kind of predict, where we would be? And the sad thing is that these issues have always been there.
Yeah, if you're Black, you've always been here. We're not predicting. We just living in the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michelle, what is the mission behind Passion Music Group?
I named my company Passion Music Group because jazz is my passion. We don't, when you're in the business of jazz, you don't do it for the money. You do it because you love it. And I mean, yes, we want to make money too. But, we do it because we love it. And I started the company working with artists because that has been my mission from day one. Even when I was at the labels, artists would always ask me to represent them. And at the time I couldn't do it. But once I left the label, my last label, which was Atlantic, I started my company, and I've been working with and have been blessed to work with amazing artists. I'm currently working with young organist, pianist Matthew Whitaker. I have a beautiful sister, a string trio, the String Queens. I have beautiful vocalists Vanessa Rubin and Lauren Solis. I'm just been blessed.
It's your passion, Gail.
It's my passion.
The Gail Boyd Artist Management. I know you want to talk about that a little bit.
I do. I represent 8 artists and 8 jazz artists, 1 dance artist: John Clayton, Richie Goods, Don Braden, Michael Olatuja, Lakeisha Benjamin, Brianna Thomas, Scott Tixier, Jay Solomon Curtis is my dance artist, and a new South African pianist, Naduzo Makatini, who is wonderful. So I'm really proud of my roster.
Excellent. And Dee Dee, Before we get to your Memphis, yes, I'm ready. Terry Johns, our soulmate, says, first time I heard Miss Bridgewater, she had a song that was not jazz. It was a disco song called Bad for Me.
That's right. That's right. I've been so many places in my life and time. I've sung a lot of songs. And yeah, all different kinds of musical genres. Yes.
Talk to us about Memphis. Yes, I'm ready. That's your birthplace, your hometown.
Yeah, I was born in Memphis, and I had done an album in 2007 that was called Red Earth, a Malian Journey, where I had tried to find my African ancestry. I didn't have the funds at that time to go to Dr. Gates and have him do my DNA. So I tried to do it intrinsically, spiritually, and found myself in Mali. At any rate, after I had completed that album, my idea had been to do a trilogy. And so the next project after that one, I had wanted to follow the blues to the Delta. I had made the connection of the blues with West African music. I did do my DNA through AfricanAncestry.com. And so I'm 100% Nigerian on my mother's side. But I wanted to do this blues project, and it was quite large. And
you're telling me I'm running out of time, Dee Dee.
Okay. At any rate, I did it because I love Memphis and I love that music. Bye.
Where can we get the album?
You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Apple.
Anywhere you find music, we can get it.
Anywhere you find it, you can find me.
Thank you so much, Michelle, Gail, Terry Lynn, and Dee Dee Bridgewater for being on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Until tomorrow, everybody, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.